Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. Today is May 1st, 2021, and we are doing our monthly Zazenkai. It's spring here. There's lots of daffodils in the garden. It's a bit of an overcast and cool spring day. I'm very happy to see the flowers coming up in the garden. Although it's kind of nice to contemplate how they don't know anything about the difficulties human societies are going through. It's just another spring, another beautiful spring, even though we are in the middle of a hard lockdown here in Ontario. But outside, it's just another beautiful spring day. Today, my Dharma talk, my Teisho, is going to be a continuation of what we have been talking this year. This is now, I believe, a fifth talk in this series. So I will just do a little bit of a recap of what we've been talking this year. In January, we started with the little old Buddhist sutra that kind of gave us some pointers. What sort of things we need to work on in order to be able to meditate, in order for our meditation to be effective. And then there was a few talks about what meditation practice actually is and how to practice meditation. And we talked about some of the non-conceptual aspects of meditation practice. And the last month, we talked about mindfulness and how mindfulness training relates to meditation practice and how it all fits together. So today, I'm going to talk about development of wisdom, which is what all of this eventually kind of leads to. It's a little bit of a difficult topic to talk about. Wisdom is something that is not easy to quantify. It's very, in its very nature, is that it doesn't allow itself to be quantified, objectified. So it's not the easiest thing to talk about, but I'm going to try. Anyway, the meditation practice in general has two functions. One is to pacify, and the second is to clarify. So when you're doing meditation practice, the pacification is something that you can experience right away. It's something that will have immediate effect. As soon as you begin to settle down, your mind is becoming more quiet. That in itself has immediate effect. But this business of clarity and of developing wisdom is much more difficult to observe and to see. In some ways, it's something that can happen quickly, because when we have an insight and see something that we couldn't see before, there's a very sharp contrast. And so it seems like there's a major breakthrough being made. But on another hand, it's something that is very, very gradual and actually almost impossible to notice. So I was thinking, how can I introduce this and make this a bit more accessible to all of us, really? And I thought of ancient Greece, and there used to be two schools of philosophy there, and they were kind of debating each other. This was very, very early on, earlier than all those big names that you heard about. And so one way of thinking was that everything that we observe, everything that we can see, it is always in a state of change, always in a state of flux. There's nothing solid anywhere. Maybe you heard that expression that you can never step in the same river twice. This is a sort of embodiment of that philosophy. And the idea is that nothing is solid, really. Everything is always changing. So this was one school of thought. And another school of thought was that there was some kind of changeless being behind it. That there was something eternal behind all this change. So on one hand, the only thing that things had in common was this change, continuous change. And on the other hand, there was this idea that even though things seems to change, there was behind it, there was something solid. And so this was kind of debate was going on. And so I thought of this because I want to kind of use this as an introduction to the 3 marks of existence, which is a Buddhist teaching. But this kind of got me thinking, just the way we are every day, it seems that we have to create solidity in our lives. Otherwise, we can't get through the day. We have to create memories. We have to create relationships between things, just even to do simple things, just to get through a single day. It seems like we are always creating solidity when in reality there is none. So this is a problem, basically. That we are always creating solid objects. We are creating solid patterns. We are creating relationships. Because we need to, we have to. But in reality, we are, not just we are living in a place of continuous change, but we ourselves are continuous change. So this creates this dynamic. And so now I want to talk about 3 marks of existence. So the first of this is impermanence, which we sort of understand. This is obvious, that everything is always changing. And the second is emptiness, which goes a step further, which says that it's not so much that the thing is changing, it's that there is nothing in itself. There's no essence to that thing that is changing itself. So it's going a step further than impermanence. And the third mark of existence is what's called, and this is a difficult one to translate. Even emptiness is not necessarily a good word to translate. The original is shunyata. Sometimes I like to call it spaciousness more than emptiness. But dukkha is the third mark of existence, which is sometimes translated as suffering. That's not a very good translation. You can also say unhappiness, or maybe some continuous thirst, striving, continuous dissatisfaction, the need to move to something else. So if you think about the world as in this continuous flux, these 3 marks of existence are really describing it rather well, because even what we call a suffering or unhappiness, you can see it as just the aspect of this change. It's just this kind of striving of moving forward in time and space, desire. you can say desire is basically just change, not being able to remain where we are at. So this is introduction now. So this is our problem. We have to create this solidity. We have to, just to get through the day. And yet, when we do, we end up with a lot of problems. When we call what we call this great matter of birth and death is nothing but a byproduct of emptiness and solidity. This sort of contrast between the two. So this is a kind of just an introduction to why we need to develop wisdom. Wisdom is basically our way of negotiating this, of negotiating emptiness and form. So first, I want to say, what it is that's really enjoyable about wisdom? What it is that we can really appreciate about development of wisdom? I think what's most enjoyable about it is that it frees us from our fears. I think this interplay between our need to create and our habit to create solid things and the nature of impermanence and emptiness and unhappiness creates a lot of fear in us. So the most enjoyable thing, or most liberating thing about wisdom is that it frees us from those fears. And the way we begin this development of wisdom is by generating insights. And in order to generate those insights, we need to meditate. We simply need to be able to see things that we couldn't see before. And this is the beginning, but this is not the end. And here we are finally coming to the point in my talk that I really want to talk about, because it's difficult to talk about wisdom directly and what it is, because it's not knowledge. It's not me saying to you, you need to be able to see the emptiness or to see the empty nature of things. If that were wisdom, it would be easy, but it's not. That is not wisdom. That is the beginning of wisdom, but that is not really wisdom. So I have kind of come up with these two terms because I can't talk about directly. It's really difficult to talk about it directly. And you kind of have to glimpse it out of the corner of your eye. I came up with these two things. I want to call it high Zen and low Zen. And maybe you will see at least the direction I'm going in. And so I have a couple of points here that I'm going to make use of to explain this. And the first koan is, this is case 35 of Hekigan Roku. I'm just going to read it first to you. Manjushri asked Mujaku, where have you just come from? Mujaku said, the south. Manjushri asked, how is Buddhism being maintained in the south? Mujaku said, few mendicants observe the precepts in this age of deterioration. Manjushri asked, how many are in the Sangha? Mujaku said, some 300, some 500. Then Mujaku asked Manjushri, how is it being maintained here? Manjushri said, the ordinary and the holy live together. Snakes and dragons mix. Mujaku said, how many are in the Sangha? Manjushri said, 3 by 3 in front, 3 by 3 in the back. And this 3 by 3 this kind of rather interesting and famous Zen saying. So I want to explain what this has to do with wisdom and development of wisdom. Manjushri, of course, is a bodhisattva of wisdom. It is the kind of embodiment of wisdom. When the way we solidify wisdom, you can say, like I said, we always have to make solid things in order to understand them. So Manjushri is how we solidify wisdom. We put wisdom into this object called Manjushri. So Manjushri really stands for wisdom here. And there's, in this koan, I picked this koan, I could have picked many, but I picked this one because there's contrast between two different places. And I want to explain this difference between high Zen and low Zen. We always have to start with the high Zen. What I mean by high Zen, it's a place of realization. This is a place of insight. This is the place where we begin to develop our clarity. And the low Zen is the place of actualization. It's a place where we digest that clarity, where we bring enlightenment or the lessons of enlightenment into our everyday life. And here we have this difference. Sometimes we can call it maybe the Zen of bodhisattvas or the Zen of the masters. We have the Sangha, the people are practicing the precepts, they're working hard on Buddhist training, on realizing the truth on one hand. And on the other hand, we have this description of dragons and snakes intermingling, being so linked together that you can't separate them from each other. If you look at them, you can't tell what is an enlightened being and what is an ignorant being, for example. So we cannot really differentiate them anymore. This is the illustration of the what I would call, what I have termed as a low Zen. It always comes second. It can never come first. The first thing we need is this high Zen of bodhisattvahood. We need to find some way of dissolving the solid things which we have created. And the only way to do that is through clarity. But if we stop there, we have not yet developed wisdom. We really need to go a step further. We really need to find a way to digest that and to make it an integral part of ourselves. So I want to explain this 3-3 in front and 3-3 in back that Manjushri is using to describe how many are there. And I was thinking, how can I illustrate this to you? People make a big deal out of what that means. It's very simple, really. I don't know when was the last time where you, maybe when you were at university, or maybe when you were even going back to high school, when you're with your friends and you're leaving the building, maybe the classes are finished and you're walking out, and 3 of you are walking in front and 3 of you are walking in the back. 6 people are walking, 6 friends, let's say, and 3 of you are in front and 3 of you. It's a very ordinary picture, in other words. 3-3 in front, 3-3 in back. It's just a group of friends walking together. That's all that is. It is so ordinary, you can't tell. That's the whole point of the low Zen, is that you can't tell, is this something that is enlightened, or is this something that has always been there, that we are always facing. So this dragons and snakes intermingling, and this 3-3 in front, 3-3 in back, this is just you walking with your friends. Maybe nowadays when people go to work, they don't walk out of the buildings together, but maybe you're going out to supper, you meet up in town with your friends and you're walking down the street together and going to restaurants. how many are there? 3 in front and 3 in back. It's that kind of picture. It's that kind of sensibility. This is the Zen, high Zen that we need to develop first. This is the Zen of the sky. It's the Zen of high inspiration. It is the Zen of great power. The low Zen, it's a very quiet kind of Zen. It is a Zen of earthiness. It's very earthy. It's a peasant kind of Zen. It's a Zen that does laundry. It's a kind of Zen that washes dishes in the kitchen. This is the low Zen. I can sort of try to explain it to you maybe through another way of swimming. Let's say I want to make a difference between conceptual Zen, high Zen, and low Zen in terms of us learning how to swim, because it's something we are not born, we have to learn how to swim. We are not born knowing how to swim. So conceptual Zen would be like reading books about swimming and never actually getting into the water. We know a lot about it. We know a lot of technical things about swimming, but we have never actually got into the water. We don't really know how to swim, but we know a lot about swimming. This would be a conceptual Zen. This is mainly, I would say, 99% of the Zen that is practiced today. As far as wisdom is concerned, as far as pacifying things are concerned, like I said, meditation has these two functions. Pacification is something that you don't need a lot of time for. Even just 5 minutes may be enough to begin to pacify, and that's very good. It's the beginning. But as far as clarity is concerned, most of it has to do with our confusion. We confuse conceptual knowledge with actual wisdom. So this, I would say, is like reading books in order to learn how to swim. And then the high Zen, it's actually getting in the water and becoming really, really proficient with swimming. You can go and compete if you want to. You're just really, really good. You're a swimmer, a real swimmer. You're not struggling anymore. You're confident that you can swim well. Low Zen would be like where you can't tell difference anymore, whether you're swimming or you're walking. If somebody was to tell you, go to the store, and to you it would be the same whether you walk there or whether you swim there. You simply cannot tell anymore. You're equally at home in water as you're outside of it. This is a difference between the two. And this is what koans try to inspire us to do. There's that saying, sleeping when tired, eating when hungry. We heard it so many times. It's kind of final distillation of Zen. And we can just, at some point, we can just roll our eyes. It doesn't really say much to us. Well, let me give you one more example of this. What I'm talking about, maybe it will make things clear a little bit more. I'm going to use Zen Master Takusan. And so the first koan, it's case 4 of Hekigan Roku. This is when Zen Master Takusan is coming to meet Zen Master Isan. And so he was on a pilgrimage, and it says Takusan went to Isan. Carrying his bundle with him into the teaching hall, he crossed back and forth, east to west and west to east. Looking around, he said, "Nothing, nothing. and immediately went out. When Tokusan reached the monastery gate, he said, "Still, it wouldn't do to be hasty." So he went back to meet with Isan properly. As Isan sat there, Tokusan held up his sitting mat and said, "Teacher." Isan reached for his fly whisk. Tokusan immediately shouted and strode out. Tokusan turned his back on the teaching hall, put on his straw sandals, and left at once. That evening, Isan asked the assembly leader, "Where is the newcomer who was here earlier?" The assembly leader said, "At that time, he turned his back on the teaching hall, put on his sandals, and went away." Isan said, "Hereafter, this lad will build a grass hut on the summit of a solitary peak and scold Buddhas and revile Zen masters." Okay, so here we have example, and this is the beginning. What I see in Tokusan here is the beginning. I like it that he went back. It's the beginning of this struggle between high Zen and low Zen. It's interesting, Hakuin Zenji, who was a famous Japanese Zen master, and he's the one who revived the Koan Zen. And basically, I don't know without his effort that we would be here, because Koan Zen was on its way out, and he gave it new energy. He said of this last statement of Isan's, hereafter this lad will build a grass hut on the summit of a solitary peak. He said there's something very scary about that. There's something terrifying about Isan's Zen. Hakuin Zenji said that. And what's terrifying is that this man of high clarity, that is Tokusan, in this koan, this happens just after his great enlightenment experiences, and he's so clear, and he's so strong, and he's so powerful. Yet Isan basically says, this lad, this fellow, Isan is completely unimpressed with this performance. Of course, Tokusan is correct, but nevertheless, he still has some ways to go. It seems that way, at least according to Isan. And Hakuin Zen said there's something very terrifying about that. So that's one picture, and then there's a part B to this, and this is another koan of Tokusan's. Most of you are familiar with this, and this is the koan of him carrying his bowls. This is the case 13 of Mumonkan. I will just read the first part of this. One day, Tokusan came down to the hall carrying his bowls. Seppo asked him, "Old master, the bell has not yet rung, nor the drum sounded. Where are you going with your bowls?" Tokusan immediately went back to his room. I'll stop here. That's only the part we're interested in today. We see a very different Tokusan here. This is this turning around and going back. This is the low Zen. This is an example of the low Zen. What happens between the two? What happens to us? How do we integrate this high clarity where it can function in our everyday life completely invisibly? That it's integrated to such high degree that even we ourselves cannot find it anymore. I want to tell you, it's hard for us to appreciate these masters. It's hard for us to appreciate certain things. I'll give you just one other little story. Why it's so hard to appreciate some of these things. Why it's sometimes it's easy to appreciate high Zen, and it's difficult to appreciate low Zen. I heard this story recently. I was watching a video a documentary on a famous jazz pianist. And somebody was telling the story that this happened. He was playing in a small club and there were people, a lot of jazz enthusiasts were there listening. And suddenly everybody started clapping. And this fellow who was telling the story, at the table where he was sitting, probably his friend was there with him. And after that, his friend kept turning and looking at the door and kept looking at the door. So he asked him, "What are you doing? Why you keep looking at the door?" And his friend said, "Well, somebody famous must have come in. I want to see who that was." And he says, "Well, why do you think somebody famous came in?" He said, "Everybody started clapping." And he said, "Nobody came. They're not clapping for that. They're clapping because of what he played on the piano, what he did." And this friend the one who was looking toward the door, he said, that thing, that just sounded like I took a piece of dusting cloth and dusted the top of the piano. So what I'm trying to say is he couldn't appreciate that. It takes a high level of sophistication to appreciate certain things. To appreciate Tokusan maybe turning around, you really have to be far along the path to appreciate those kind of things. To appreciate low Zen is hard. It's not so easy to do that. We really have to develop our eye and digest so much of it before we can even begin to appreciate some of these things. So this morning, I was up at 4:30 thinking, what am I going to say to you today? And I needed high Zen in order to say anything at all. I needed to rely on high Zen because low Zen is completely useless. I couldn't say anything. I didn't want to say anything. So I had to rely on high Zen, even just to come here in front of you and to talk to you, to have a sense of inspiration. And because low Zen, it's like a cat that just kind of like half opens her eye and just goes back to sleep. It's completely useless. The only thing it's good for, the very best thing that low Zen is for, what it's good for and the best thing for, is it's good for impermanence, and it's good for emptiness, and it's good for unhappiness. This is what it's made for. This is low Zen. And this is, I hope somewhere in this whole big story, you're beginning to develop some feeling to what wisdom is like and what developing wisdom is like. Okay, so we're going to end here, and we will end with reciting the 4 Great Vows.